This one is by request. It's stash time here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Or is it stash time on November 20th on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball? Today's show is going to be on different types of stashes. There are 3 tiers, certainly at this juncture of the season, because we're only 4 and a little bit weeks into the year. And so we can't just go willy-nilly like we do leading up to the All-Star break and the trade deadline. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dan Besbris. Thanks so much for tuning in. Follow me on Twitter at Dan Besbris. Follow me on Blue Sky at Old Man Squad. And on Instagram at Old Man Squad Fantasy. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Drop a 5-star review if you're listening on Apple or Spotify. And check out our buddies at BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform, and your numero uno source for online betting. They've got the earliest odds. They've got live in-game betting. And BetOnline provides you with all the action, the ability to watch the games as they happen live with the largest selection of odds on everything from football to NBA and college basketball to hockey to UFC and MMA. Head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. So, what the hell are we actually doing on today's show? This is the very early stash board, and what I think I'm going to do is we'll do a show in November, that'll be this one, on very early stashes. We'll update it in December as things go. And obviously, if something big takes place, we can kind of just drop in and, an in-the-moment type of deal. And January, we'll probably do maybe like bi-weekly, 2 shows in January. And then February, we'll probably do a whole handful of them because that's what everybody wants to know leading up to the All-Star break and the trade deadline. Who are the guys that could be these big boom dudes coming out of it? And we'll get more clarity as the year goes. So right now, it's kind of a broad list. It's not a lot of names because I don't what's the most you could do? Stash one guy maybe at this point. And head-to-head, it's got to be an active stash. At Roto, you can get away with a little bit more, but you do kind of want to have those bench slots for someone you might ultimately use. There's something fun and shiny about the concept of the stash, but we have to temper that with the notion that it's using up a valuable spot on your roster that you should probably be using on someone who's actually useful to you right now. So is November too early to stash? Usually, yes. But we, on this show, will try to isolate some names that could post a little bit of value in the short term with some upside later on. Let's start with my favorites. These are the guys that won't hurt too bad right now, but have a really nice chance of helping later. I put the word definitely in there, but that was idiotic. So if you're watching, ignore that part. We don't know if these guys are going to be great later on. They just have the highest probability among the potential stashes. Okay, that's not right. Of all the stashes we're going to talk about, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 5 on this one, and then there's like 3 on the next one and a couple on the last. I think there's like a total of 8 or 9 on today's show. It's an easy count when we're done, but not in the throes of the actual program. These are the guys that can either help you right now or maybe won't hurt you too bad. So it's much easier to stash these players as opposed to, do they have the highest upside? Maybe, maybe not. These are not organized by which guy I think is going to be best in late February. They're actually organized on today's show by which guys are the most useful now. And this is the list of the guys that are the most useful now, but have a nice trend arrow as the season goes. And the first name on that list is Alex Sarr, who we've talked about a fair amount on this show. So I don't want to spend as much time perhaps on him as some of the guys we haven't discussed as much. But right now, Sarr is number 133 in 9-cat. He's at 10 points, a 3-pointer, 5.5 rebounds a game, 2.3 assists, which actually isn't bad, 0.8 steals, a really nice 2.1 blocks, god-awful percentages, 35% from the field, 70, which again, for a center, not that awful, I guess, from the free throw line, just 1.2 turnovers per game. He has, without any kind of argument, floated his value with the 2.9 combined defensive stats per ball game, because 10 points, 5.5 boards, a 3-ball, 2.3 assists. These are all serviceable, but not good numbers. And then the field goal percent in particular has been downright god-awful. But we know enough about how young players, rookies, come into the NBA and learn the game as they go. Sarr's not just a strict camp out under the bucket big man, even if it would help his fantasy numbers if he was right now. He's moving around. He's shooting 3 balls. He's trying to do other stuff. He's on a Wizards team that's not going to get him the world's greatest looks anyway. But the beauty part of Alex Sarr is that if you can sit on him while he's putting up what effectively here is like filler level type of numbers, as the year goes, forget opportunity, because we know that's going to get better as the season goes on. The Wizards are going to try to unload anybody they have on that roster that's like over the age of 26, and they're going to give their extremely early first-round pick all the opportunity he can handle. He's just going to get better as the year goes. So I think the upside is through the roof on Sarr. The question is more how long it takes to get there and whether or not you can stomach this kind of filler level appeal in the meantime. Donovan Clingan, interestingly, who's ranked right next to Sarr at 132 in only 16 minutes per game, is showing that he can be a big-time field goal percent shot blocking presence in limited minutes. He is more the center that's just going to camp out around the bucket and get putbacks and rebounds and block shots on defense. Not, at least so far, hasn't hurt much in free throws, although it does feel like 80s is probably not a number that you should expect to continue. If I'm remembering his college numbers, they were pretty good, but they were okay, right? I think he was like middling at free throws, 60-something%, right? Oh, 58. It was actually worse. I thought it was 60-something. It was 58. So that free throw number is probably going to come down. And he's floating his numbers right now on the back of DeAndre Ayton being hurt, which we don't really know how long that's going to be. It sounds like he's doubtful for their next one, which has been great actually for 2 names in this pocket of stash guys. And that's part of the appeal for Donovan Clingan, is that DeAndre Ayton gets hurt a lot. His team is basically tanking, if they're not totally tanking. He is a threat. I don't think Ayton gets traded because I think his contract is too hard to move. When did he sign that 4-year deal? Was it last season he signed the 4-year deal, or was it the year before? Year before? All right, so there's 2 years and like $60-some-odd million left on his deal. That's a hard one to move. Not impossible, but hard. And so I think he'll probably be there, but playing down the stretch has not exactly been a thing for the veterans in Portland. And on the other side of that, we can tie that into the next name on the list. These 2 guys are inextricably linked, is Robert Williams III, who's been going crazy with the Time Lord out. And I know, like, he's number 13 in 20 minutes a ball game. That's obviously not going to last forever. He's shooting 84% from the field, and he hasn't missed a free throw yet. But what we do know about Robert Williams is that in starters minutes, he is a second rounder. His body doesn't handle starters minutes anymore, so don't expect that to happen. But again, as you can see, he's 1 injury in Portland away from being a furious producer in fantasy. He's going to sit back-to-backs, which is a little bit unfortunate, and certainly they're not going to push him in Portland, and I don't know what would happen if he got traded, which is the other side of this coin, because there's so many things all wrapped in that Portland 3 center situation. You've got Ayton, you've got Clingan, you've got the Time Lord, your 3 centers. When they're all healthy, Ayton's the guy that can squeak out value. Time Lord, I don't even know how much he's going to play when all 3 of those guys are upright. Clingan, same kind of thing. Those guys might get like a dozen minutes apiece on a good night. So that's difficult. I get it, to hang on and play those dudes in those situations. They'll be okay, but they certainly won't be good. But Ayton gets hurt a lot. Robert Williams, we're talking about guys that might get traded. He's the easier one of those dudes. There are a bunch of teams out there that would love to get their hands on a more traditional center. Robert Williams is that. He's got bounce. He's a very good defender. Yeah, his body is breaking down. But again, good teams are going to be looking for a guy that they can just get healthy and learn things by playoff time. And he's barely making any money by NBA standards. Robert Williams is making $12.5 million this year. I believe he has a $13 million, I think it's $13 million next year. But, like, that's nothing. That doesn't hamstring a team. There are a bunch of clubs out there that could use a guy like that. The biggest one on the board would be the Pelicans, but they have to decide whether or not they're even going to try this year with their entire team down. Another one would be a team like the Lakers. I'm sure they'd love to upgrade from Jackson Hayes to Robert Williams. And if you scour the NBA, I'm sure you could find a number of teams that would love to get a backup center that they could play 18 to 20 minutes. Forget the fact that, like, for the Pels, he'd get mid-20s in minutes. And other teams, do we think, I don't know, do we think a team like the Pistons would want to actually buy? They're 7-9. They're actually the 7th seed. I know they've got Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart, but maybe they'd like to go get a veteran in there. Would the Heat like to have a more competent backup to Bam Adebayo? The Hawks already have 3 centers. Just look up and down the board. The Knicks, would they like a backup center to Karl-Anthony Towns that's not Jericho Sims? I don't know what assets these teams have to move to get to a guy like Robert Williams. So a lot of this might just be dust in the wind. But if you're looking at the competitive teams in both conferences, the Warriors could use a center. The Thunder could use a center now that Chet is out for 3 months or more. Lakers could use one. Rockets could use one. Nuggets could use a backup. Suns could use one. Like, there are only like 3 teams in the West that don't have a big-time backup center need or more. The Mavs have 2 centers. The Wolves have enough centers. Is that it? I mean, I could argue that every other team in the West needs either a backup center or more than a backup center, the ones that are trying to compete. So that's all wrapped up in kind of this upside appeal of, okay, you take Robert Williams, if he gets traded someplace, his job probably gets bigger on a night-to-night than a 3-center monster in Portland. And if he gets traded, Donovan Clingan steps into a bigger role. If DeAndre Ayton gets shut down, then Donovan Clingan steps into a massive role. And so that's why these guys are interesting. And they're also doing some stuff right now. Gradey Dick is on this board, and I mean, you could make the argument that he doesn't belong here because he's already been useful, but he's number 105. And my issue with him is that he doesn't do much besides just hit threes. And someone was yelling at me. He's a good free throw shooter as well. But he needs a truckload of usage to get there. So for Gradey Dick, the injuries in Toronto playing a very large role right now. I don't know when Scotty Barnes is coming back. It sounds like he might actually get reevaluated today. So it's hopefully not that far away. Emmanuel Quickly, probably not all that far away. Another week, 2 weeks, something like that. Does Kelly Olynyk show up? Does Bruce Brown ever show up? And then Gradey Dick probably drops into the lower tier of these guys. But if the Raptors are bad this year, and I mean, they are, like, they're 3-12, and I get it that injuries have played a role in that, and the bottom of the East is so terrible that they're not going to be eliminated until late. If they do go into shutdown mode, that's how Gradey Dick gets a little bit of a bump. But he's, I don't know, maybe he should have been one rung down. And then Bub Carrington is another one. And what we don't know about Bub and whether or not he and Gradey Dick should eventually get moved down one tier is, so Bub, by the way, is number 113 right now in 30 minutes a ball game. What is the Malcolm Brogdon situation gonna do when the Wizards are in a competitive ball game? Is there going to be more Malcolm? And remember, Bilal Coulibaly was out for their last one. What does Bub's role look like when Bilal's playing full minutes and Brogdon is doing whatever the full minutes are that the Wizards want him to be doing? It's not going to be starters level, but like full for Brogdon might be 20. Does that mean that Bub is going to be capped at like 26, 27, 28, something like that? That would make it a harder hold all the way through. The Wizards are going to pull the plug on anybody again over 26 years old kind of thing. Do they try to move Kyle Kuzma? Do they try to move Jonas Valanciunas? Do they try to move Malcolm Brogdon? The answer is probably yes on all of those, but how many happen, we don't know. So, right now, Bub is still playable, but it might not be the case in a week. And then you might have to make the call of, okay, this is becoming difficult. How badly do I want to hang on to this dude? How much is he going to do after the All-Star break? I think you try, and that's the overarching thing on most of these guys, and not perhaps as much Gradey Dick because he does need multiple usage guys out of the way. Alex Sarr is just a learning curve thing. Donovan Clingan is like they're just going to play him more as the year goes, but also there's like a Robert Williams, DeAndre Ayton get out of the way thing. Robert Williams needs either someone to be out or to be traded. But those guys all have big time per game appeal. Where Gradey Dick, it's like, okay, we need a bunch of things to happen. We need 2 to 3 things to happen. And then with Bub Carrington, I think it's easier to make the case for the stash on him because we really only need one thing to happen. And then anything beyond that just continues to push him farther inside the top 100. Second board, these are the guys that are a little messy right now, but interesting upside later. Those names are Stephon Castle, Zaccharie Risacher, and Yves Missi. Castle has been really fun to watch, but his percentages are dog do. So you really it's almost impossible to sit on him right now. I know he's had some pretty good popcorn numbers lately. Had a 22-5 game mixed in there, 23-3, 14-6. He had 8 assists in his last ball game, but the free throw's bad. The field goal is worse. If you're trying to squeak through the next 3 months with that going on, you better be punting at least one of those 2 categories. Maybe both, maybe points league kind of stuff. Because I don't think the field goal percent is going to magically fix itself over the next couple of months. It's going to be a slow and steady burn on that one until it gets a little bit better. Free throw, I mean, he wasn't a great foul shooter in college, so I don't know why we'd expect it to just magically get better now. So I don't expect that to come up all that much, maybe a few percentage points, but it's not going to be a positive, which means you're going to need a lot. Points, boards, assists, steals, blocks. You're going to need a whole bunch of stuff to get there, on top of the fact that the Spurs are 7-8 right now. And I don't know what their record's going to look like in February. I do think that they probably do ultimately tank at some point this year. They know they're not good enough to go win a title. And so you're better off giving yourself any chance at all at Flag or whoever else at the top of the draft. Just get one more key asset and then try to push for it. But they're way better than the bottom teams right now. So they don't really have an incentive to pull the plug on everybody. And it's not like they have a ton of veterans on that team anyway. They've got Barnes and CP3 are kind of the vets. And I think they like what those guys bring for, as learning for some of the other guys. And they've done this without Devin Vassell and without Jeremy Sohan. Mostly. Not completely, but mostly. So, I don't know. Me, guys. I'm a 9-cat roto player at heart. So this particular group is probably the hardest one for me to make a case on. And Zaccharie Risacher is kind of the same case as Stephon Castle, although at least right now with Castle, he's getting the playing time already. It's just going to be a learning curve. With Risacher, he's behind a couple of guys who just came back from injury, DeAndre Hunter and Bogdan Bogdanovic and Jalen Johnson, who missed a game. Hopefully he'll be back for the next one. I don't think I can make almost any case to hold on to Risacher for 3 months. I think he's going to do way more harm than good over these 3. This is the one where you maybe think about trying to grab him about 2 weeks before the trade deadline or All-Star break or whenever you start to think that the Hawks might begin to look into that direction. But again, Atlanta is 7-8. They're a game under 500, and they're the 5 seed in the Eastern Conference. So they're not just going to turn it over to the rookie if they're still in the mix. And by the time February comes around, they might accidentally be 20-30 and the 10 seed in the Eastern Conference. And it might be too late to tank. Doesn't mean they won't still try, but there's not even a guarantee that Risacher gets to go full bore this season. And if he does, it might be relegated to the last 3 or 4 weeks. It might not even be a trade deadline thing. And then Yves Missi, this one comes down to whether or not you think the Pelicans are going to pull the plug on this year, because Alvarado's out for a few weeks now, and Trey Murphy's on a rest day, and Brandon Ingram has ankle soreness, and I don't know how long that's going to deal with, but I think on the back-to-back, maybe it's just a rest day. But Zion's out for we don't know how long, and McCollum's still out, and DeJounte Murray, who's maybe getting closer. Pelicans can't lose that many more ball games, or they're going to lose the rope on the Western Conference, and that conference is sickeningly tough right now. The 13 seed Blazers are 6-8. That team would be the 8 seed in the Eastern Conference. Blazers would be in the play-in. Pelicans are 4-11. They're way back. They got to climb over a bunch of teams just to get to the play-in. So if they do, if the guys don't come back healthy for New Orleans, if they can't turn it around in the next 3 or 4 weeks, it might be time to just see what they've got with a young guy. And so of the names in this board on the YouTube show, which is Castle, Risacher, and Missi, Yves is probably the easiest one to make a case on because they don't have a center right now, and there isn't one coming back. But he hasn't done very much with his opportunity. That's the big issue here. You got to do more with your chance in the short term. And Missi's number 194 in 9 category leagues at this moment. That's not close enough. He's doing more harm than good. So these guys, I don't think I can advocate actually stashing for now. And the final board, just a couple of names, 2 names, guys that are really doing nothing at the moment, but have an opportunity to jump from nothing into a very large role, are Jalen Smith and Noah Clowney. And Smith is an easy one. Like, you guys almost don't even need an explanation on this guy. There's so many Jalens in the NBA. Go hunt down Jalen Smith on your rank board and see if you can find him. He's way down there, but it's exclusively because he's playing behind Nikola Vucevic, who's playing 34 minutes a game right now. Sorry, 32 minutes a game. If Vooch moves, Jalen Smith grooves. It's as simple as that. You can't pick him up unless you have a total dead roster spot. Like, this isn't a thing you can do on the head-to-head leagues, unless they're weekly, I guess, because he's averaging 7.5 points and 5 boards on not particularly great percentages. But we saw Jalen Smith enough that in Indiana, like, just pull up the game log for him, and you got none so far this year because I don't think Vooch has missed a game yet. When Vooch does miss a game, then then everybody's gonna remember what we've been talking about here, which is Jalen Smith in starters minutes is pretty entertaining. We fell for this trick in Indiana a few times, and it never really materialized. But, like, you can look at the Indy game log from last year and look for games where he played, like, 26 minutes. I don't even need 30 minutes out of him. Give me the Jalen Smith 26-minute games, and it was, like, 11-9 with 3 blocked shots, 19-10 with 2 blocks and 3 3-pointers and good percentages. And by the way, that's it. Those are the only 2. He only played 26 minutes or more twice all of last season, and they were good. So think of this. Think of him dropping another dozen minutes into his bucket or more in Chicago. That'd be pretty freaking impressive. But Vooch has got to be out of the way. It's just not a thing that's going to happen until Vooch is either traded, rested, whatever, injured. He's been incredibly durable over the last half decade. So can you do it? I mean, I would not. We're way too far away from the deadline to pick up either one of these guys. And then the other one is Noah Clowney, who we talked about a bunch during the preseason. I listed him as someone, remember you guys, I don't know if you guys remember, I did a preseason show called The One Away Guys. As it turns out, he's more like 2 or 3 away. We need Cam Johnson, most likely moved for Clowney to pick up, on top of probably no Dorian Finney-Smith or Nick Claxton or Ben Simmons, because we've only seen Clowney clear 20 minutes once, I think, so far this year. Twice. Sorry, 2 times. 3rd game of the year, he had 13 and 4. Did hit 3 3-pointers there. November 11th, that was against the Pelicans, who we just talked about. He had 15 and 7 with a block. The other games, there's nothing there. The minutes aren't there. The touches aren't there. We're so far away, and so many things need to break right. But it's a name to watch as we get closer to the trade deadline. And that's when you could think about maybe reaching out on someone like a Noah Clowney. But frankly, between the 2 stashes I just talked about, I think I'd rather have Jalen Smith, because at least the path is simpler. And that is your stash show. I knew it wasn't going to be a super long one. It didn't need to be. A quick recap on some of the names we just talked about. The guys that help you a little bit right now and a lot of it later: Alex Sarr, Donovan Clingan, Time Lord Robert Williams III, Gradey Dick, and Bub Carrington. Although Gradey Dick, you could almost move down a peg as soon as one guy comes back in Toronto. Bub, I don't know. I may have a different feeling on him the next time the Wizards play a competitive game, because I kind of want to see what the hell they look like with Bilal and Brogdon and Bub all together. The middle pack, if you want to put Gradey Dick in there, plus Stephon Castle, Zaccharie Risacher, Yves Missi, and the pure stash, cannot use them in any format right now, squad on guys: Jalen Smith and Noah Clowney. And that's your very early stash board, ladies and gentlemen. If nothing changes, we'll do another one in December at some point. But this was, again, by demand. Someone wanted to know what I was thinking for guys down the line. That's what I was thinking on guys down the line. Please remember to subscribe. Please remember to throw a thumbs up on this bad boy. Drop a comment in there if you feel so inclined. Rate and review iTunes and Spotify listeners. And tomorrow, we'll bring you a nice little Wednesday recap. That's right. Wednesday recap. Today's Wednesday. Oh, my goodness. Struggling, man, since my kid had that surgery on Monday has got my days all discombobulated. By the way, doing really well today. He's on Motrin. He's like bouncing off the walls. I don't know how we're going to keep him from tearing a stitch. We got to tie him to a bed or something. Not really doing that. Can't say these things on YouTube. Can't say these things anywhere. It's a joke. It's a joke, obviously. But kids are hard to keep from running and bouncing around. And that's like the one thing that they're not allowed to do coming out of a surgical procedure. Tomorrow we'll do a Wednesday recap. We'll do some hot cold. I'll update the hot cold board. So that'll give us another look at some guys that might be some sells or buys. And then after that, Friday, we'll have the big weekend review show. A lot of fun. Good stuff. Good stuff. Have a great Wednesday, everybody. Remember to set those lineups. I will put out some schedule analysis stuff over on Twitter, and I'll see you guys on social and Blue Sky, by the way. Again, Dan Besbris on Twitter, Old Man Squad on Blue Sky. So long, everybody.